Did you know that there are real conversations happening in the United States about certain states wanting to join Canada? It's not some far-off fantasy, it's a growing discussion that's been gaining traction in recent years. From frustration with US policies to shared values with their northern neighbor, some states are seriously considering the idea. Stick with us until the end, because you might be surprised by which states are part of this conversation and why they're thinking about it. Let's dive into 10 US states where the dream of joining Canada might not be as far-fetched as it sounds. 1. Alaska. Let's start with Alaska. It's got a unique relationship with both the US and Canada. Located far from the lower 48 states, Alaska feels more like its own country. The state is surrounded on 3 sides by Canada, and geographically, it's closer to Canada than most other US states. Over the years, some Alaskans have discussed the idea of leaving the US behind and joining their northern neighbors. But it's not just geography. Politically, Alaska has often been at odds with the federal government, from environmental policies to energy regulations. Many feel their interests are better aligned with Canada's more lenient approach. Some polls have shown a significant portion of the population supporting the idea of joining Canada, especially when tensions with Washington rise. 2. California. California is a different case altogether. As one of the largest and wealthiest states in the US, California has a history of challenging federal authority. From progressive laws to its own economy that sometimes seems like it could run independently, California has found itself on the fringe of the American political landscape. Culturally, the Golden State has strong ties with Canada, especially in areas like tech, entertainment, and environmental policies. The state's liberal ideals often align more with Canadian politics than with the conservative leanings of much of the rest of the US. There have even been polls showing that a surprising number of Californians, especially in certain demographics, are open to the idea of joining Canada. 3. Oregon. Oregon has a long history with a movement called Cascadia. The idea of Cascadia suggests that the Pacific Northwest region, encompassing parts of Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia, should form a new, independent entity. Some supporters of this movement argue that the political and cultural values of the region are more aligned with Canada than with the US. Oregon's environmental and progressive policies align more with Canada's approach, and the state has often leaned left politically. While most Oregonians are unlikely to pursue full-blown secession, the idea of aligning more closely with Canada is something that comes up every now and then, especially among the state's more liberal citizens. 4. Washington. Washington State, particularly the area around Seattle, has a strong connection to Canada. Not only is it geographically close, but it shares economic and cultural ties with its northern neighbor. And let's not forget about Point Roberts, a small part of Washington that's completely surrounded by Canada. Because of its proximity to Canada, Washington has long been a state where discussions about the benefits of being part of Canada occur, especially when it comes to trade and politics. The state's liberal views, economic ties with Canada, and shared border make this conversation far from unusual. While it might sound absurd, many Washingtonians have seriously considered whether they could live with Canada's policies over the US's. 5. New York. You might be surprised to find New York on this list. After all, it's the economic powerhouse of the US. But even in this busy state, there have been whispers about the possibility of joining Canada, especially from some state politicians. State Senator Liz Krueger once brought up the idea of New York joining Canada as a response to US federal policies that she felt weren't in the state's best interest. While it was more of a rhetorical suggestion, the conversation sparked interest, especially in areas where people were frustrated with federal gridlock. Public opinion varies, but it's clear that some New Yorkers are curious about what life could be like under Canada's more progressive policies. 6. Vermont. Vermont has been a hotbed for secessionist movements for years, but the most famous of these is the Second Vermont Republic. This movement advocates for Vermont's independence or even union with Canada. Historically, Vermont had a brief period of independence before it became part of the US. In today's climate, Vermont's independent spirit still runs strong, with many Vermonters feeling they are more aligned with Canadian values than with the US. 7. Maine. Maine has had its own unique relationship with Canada, especially considering that it was once part of British North America before it became a state. Historically, Maine has always had strong ties to its Canadian neighbors, especially in areas like trade, tourism, and culture. Though the idea of Maine joining Canada might sound like something from the past, the modern-day sentiment isn't all that different. Some people in Maine feel they have more in common with Canada's political system and might benefit from being part of a more progressive country. 8. Minnesota. Minnesota's case is a bit more complicated, but it has sparked curiosity over the years. The state has a small area known as the Northwest Angle, which is separated from the rest of the state by Canada. This geographical oddity has led some to question whether Minnesota would be better off aligning more closely with Canada rather than staying tied to the US. On top of that, Minnesota has had its own political moments where some have called for the state to vote on secession. While these movements are usually met with mixed reactions, they certainly reflect a growing sentiment among some that Canada might be a more favorable option. 9. Michigan. Michigan's case is more about humor than serious political sentiment, but it's still worth mentioning. A satirical website once asked US states if they'd like to join Canada, and Michigan was one of the leading states to vote yes. While this was clearly a joke, it does highlight a deeper truth. Many Michiganders do feel a certain affinity for Canada. Whether it's the shared border or the economic and political ties, there's no denying that Michigan shares some common ground with its northern neighbor. 10. Alaska. Let's circle back to Alaska, where the idea of joining Canada continues to be a topic of conversation. It's no secret that many Alaskans feel disconnected from the US government, and some have even pushed for a referendum on the issue. Whether it's frustration with federal policies or a desire to be closer to Canada's more relaxed political climate, Alaska remains one of the most vocal states when it comes to exploring the idea of joining Canada. What's behind this growing interest in Canada? While joining Canada might sound like a long shot, it's clear that these states are questioning their place in the Union. The legal and constitutional hurdles are massive, but the idea is worth exploring. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to give us a like, share this with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more surprising stories like this one. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss out on the latest content.